A can-do movie is a movie that just insists on being made. It doesn't care what kind of resources it lacks. It will get finished. And why do I like can-do movies? It's because I've made a couple of them myself.
So I'm continuing the Stuart Gordon retrospective with Dolls from 1987. Of course, it's directed by Stuart Gordon. That's why it's in this retrospective. And it was written by Ed Naha. It had a budget of $1.2 million. And it was starring Guy Rolfe and Hilary Mason. And they're like some old time British actors, like from the British stage doing Shakespeare, from BBC shows. They're the kind of actors that Empire Pictures, by the way, is who distributed this and produced this. Charles Band himself actually produced this one, and I've got a little bit of a soft spot for Charlie Band. But these are the kind of people he liked to bring in, some folks that were like legitimate, respected actors to give his picture gravitas. Of course, one time it was Ben Casey and Lily Munster. He just brings these folks in. Chuck Connors one time. But this was still the time where you kind of needed a name to get people to rent the movie. And let's be honest, his movies were for rental, not for selling tickets. Comes in at 77 minutes. And something I never knew till I was kind of looking at the backstory on this movie, but it's inspired by a book, which I guess Reanimator was inspired by a book, so why not Dolls? But the name of the book was The Uses of Enchantment by a guy named, I think it was Bob Bettelheim. Bruno Bettelheim is who wrote that book. And another thing about this movie, and the reason I'm covering it second in my Stuart Gordon retrospective, is that it was actually filmed before From Beyond, but it was released after From Beyond. With the success of Reanimator, they thought, let's go straight to another H.P. Lovecraft film before we put out Dolls. But it is the second movie that Stuart Gordon ever directed, and it has a pretty, I'll say a pretty harsh juxtaposition compared to Reanimator. It doesn't feel like the same director for much of the time. This movie has a lot of stop motion because, of course, there's dolls in it, and the stop motion was all done by David Allen, a stop motion artist that was really close to Charles Band's heart. It was one of his favorite filmmakers to work with. He worked his whole career on this side project called Primevals. He passed away, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, maybe longer ago than that. And Charles Band continued to get that production finished for his friend. And he released it like within the last couple of years. I've never seen it, but it's on my to-watch list. In this movie, I did say it's made for video rentals, but it did have a small theatrical release. It was in a film festival in Seattle. It had a short run in New York, but it never got a wide release. And another thing I'll say watching this movie is it's clearly a dry run for Puppet Master. Like, there's no question that this movie led to Puppet Master being made when Charles Band went from Empire to Full Moon, or when Empire was taken from him. Let's be honest, he had debts he couldn't pay. But you see this and you know exactly where Puppet Master came from. In fact, it's such a clear connection. Guy Rolfe, the English actor in this movie, is who plays Andre Toulon in several of the Puppet Master movies. So a one-to-one connection right there. This was also a significant influence on demonic toys. What can I say? Charlie has a type. And sort of the star puppet, doll. These aren't puppets, they're dolls. But the star doll in this movie is Mr. Punch. And Mr. Punch has a cameo in Demonic Toys. So once again, a lot of one-to-one connections there. Charles Band will reuse things as long as people are willing to rent it. So this movie starts with this dysfunctional family that's on a vacation in the English countryside. You pick up right away, there's a lot of tension. It's a dad and a stepmom and a little girl who's, I don't know, I'm going to say 8, 9 years old. But it's very clear from the get-go that this is a wicked stepmother. She even, like her fashion and her approach, even the way she looks a little bit, is a serious Cruella de Vil vibe. And we find out that the daughter has a great mom, but she has to spend the summers with her dad and this wicked stepmother real close to home. Oh, and the little girl's name is Judy, which, is going to be clever when she gets her special little doll from the doll maker. As cliche as it could be, but in a wonderful way, it's like understanding your own trope, because they do use some pretty significant tropes from a bygone era, I'll say. But it starts out on a dark and stormy night when they're driving in their car, trying to get to who knows where. Horrible storm going on. The car gets stuck in the mud, and they got no choice but to get out and walk and try to find refuge. They're trying to seek refuge from the storm. Now, during this walk, Judy has this teddy bear that she likes, And just for purely evil reasons, as far as I can tell, her stepmom takes it and like throws it in this marsh, this almost like swampy water. Says the teddy bear will slow you down. And then we get this awesome scene. This awesome sequence where the teddy bear grows and grows and grows and makes its way out of the swamp and then turns into this horrible beast, like almost like a werewolf snout on it, and just starts attacking the stepmom and the father. And it's this great practical effect. It's a really, really good costume effect. I don't think there's any puppetry to it, but I love it. I mean, it's clearly a costume, and it's clearly 1987, but Stuart Gordon just has a way with things. And this is maybe the best scene in the movie, but then my heart breaks when suddenly we find out it's all just a fantasy that Judy was having in her head, and the teddy bear didn't actually turn into a bear monster, because I thought if all the dolls are going to do this, I'm in for a wild ride. Turns out the ride wasn't particularly wild. So again, following some tropes, they find this creepy house all alone in the forest, like no other houses as far as the eye can see. So they decide this is where we need to go to get in and out of the storm. But they don't just knock on the door like a normal person. They break in through the basement. And of course, as a person would do, somebody breaks into your basement, you come down the stairs with a shotgun. So the old guy, the doll maker, corners them with the shotgun. They explain their situation, and he actually shows a kind heart and allows them to stay with him until the storm passes. Of course, he has his wife with him too, and these two are just creepy in the best possible way. The wife, of course, is the other established British actress along with Guy Rawf, Hilary Mason. And it's really funny because right in the beginning, they see this Hilary Mason character and they ask, "Are you a witch?" And I'll say that that was some really on the nose foreshadowing, but it was a fun moment. That's when I knew she was definitely a witch. And sort of like an Agatha Christie novel or something, people just keep showing up. It's really got that classic mystery feel to it. It's a storm, people are trapped in the storm. I think Clue kind of did something like that, right? And Clue's borrowing from the same tropes that this movie is. But we get this guy that I'm going to call Proto Sean Astin. His name is Ralph, but when I see him, for 1987, like he looks nothing like Sean Astin did in 1987, but he looks a lot like Sean Astin did in Stranger Things. So the whole time I'm watching, plus the way he acts, the sort of childish demeanor and delivery that he has, and that's intentional in this movie, but I keep thinking this is Proto Sean Astin. Sometimes I forget his name is Ralph and I just call him Proto Sean Astin. And he shows up with two punk rock chicks. And apparently these punk rock chicks were hitchhiking and he picked them up because I guess he's a lonely guy and these are two very scary looking ladies. And when the car gets stuck, they're with him when he also goes to seek refuge. But of course they knock on the front door like a normal healthy person would. And then it's also revealed pretty quickly as a surprise to nobody that the punk rock chicks are thieves. Their whole plan was to nick his wallet. Read my English to English dictionary and that means steal. And then this old man is really nice to Judy. He's kind of intimidating to the adults, but he's really nice to Judy. And because she lost her teddy bear, which had the ever original name of Teddy, he gives her something to make up for it. He gives her this Mr. Punch doll. And right away, I'm thinking, okay, this is where the movie's going, Punch and Judy. And then the old man just says it. So it's like Punch and Judy. And I thought, okay, subtlety's never been Stuart Gordon's strong point, so I shouldn't expect it now. But he has this pointy chin, this pointy nose. They all kind of come down and almost meet in this jester hat. I think it's a pretty typical depiction of Punch from Punch and Judy, but given that I wasn't around in Renaissance England, I can't speak to that firsthand. And as they look around this house, this is a great touch. You can take all the supernatural elements out of it. This house is creepy as hell because it's absolutely filled with creepy dolls. And I got a few creepy dolls in my house, but nothing compared to this. Like wall-to-wall creepy dolls in almost every room. That's a nice touch and a really good job by the art department here because no two dolls look alike. They're all good-looking dolls and they're believable as dolls. And I do have to take my hat off to the art department on that one. And when it comes to the effects, there's definitely some stop-motion effects from David Allen, but there are some puppetry effects. And one thing I really like is they have a face that has to be made out of some kind of latex rubber or something like that on one of the dolls, but it looks exactly like porcelain. And every now and then you get this creepy doll smile effect, and it's just a nice touch because a lot of things are obvious. We've all seen a million movies with puppets in it, but that smile looks impossible the way that they film it, even though clearly it is possible. But that was one of my favorite effects with the puppets. They have those typical horror movie eye movement effects like anything with a killer ventriloquist dummy has. And those, are pretty straightforward puppetry, pretty typical, so that didn't really have much of an effect on me. And then the punk rock chicks look around this old house, and they're playing music loudly. And the lady of the house, Hillary Mason's character, comes into the room, the old lady, and she, tells them, hey, maybe you want to turn the music down, maybe you want to clean that paint off your face and stuff like that. And then they ask her, one punk rock chick in particular, asks her if she has any antiques, because I guess she thinks antiques is pronounced antiques. And when you look how it's spelled, you can't really blame her, right? But her goal is to steal all these antiques. And then, there's no eBay back then. I guess you find a fence who buys creepy dolls or something. But that's her plan, is to nick all the antiques and make money. She's here for her personal business. Of course, bad things happen to bad people. And when she's out creeping around at night trying to find some antiques to steal, the dolls get her. They grab her, they drag her, they smash her head into the wall several times. Her face is bloody. Not the best kill of the movie, but it's a pretty good first kill. She deserves it. Nobody has any remorse for her, except for her friend, the other punk rock chick who wants to go looking for her, wants to go find her. But when she gets killed by the wall, by the puppet smashing her into the wall, Judy, the little girl, sees it and tries to tell people about it. But of course nobody believes her. Nobody believes a kid. Anybody who's ever watched a movie knows that nobody believes a kid. However, she goes to tell Ralph, the proto Sean Astin guy, about the whole thing, and he doesn't believe her either at first. Then he looks down at her slippers and sees that there's blood on her slippers, so he becomes intrigued. He maybe doesn't believe that the dolls killed this person, but there's definitely blood somewhere, and he asks her to show him where it is. And suddenly this adult male is creeping around a house with an 8-year-old girl who's an absolute stranger. And I'm thinking, man, 80s movies would do this and never ask themselves, like, how's this going to look to people? Well, thank goodness this movie asked, how's that going to look to people? Because the little girl's dad starts calling him a pervert and telling him to stay away from her. Thank you, Stuart Gordon, for saying the quiet part out loud. And now the dolls are just all full effect. They're ready to kill everybody who needs killing. All the bad people are going to have bad things happen to them, and the next person they move along to is the wicked stepmother, the Cruella de Vil, and she's in her room while Dad's out looking for Ralph and the little girl, and he's confronting Ralph about being a perv. And all these little dolls just attack her with like tiny little knives. They're biting her, they're scratching her. It's great. Now this is the best kill of the movie, and it just goes on and on, and she's rolling around with dolls all over. And eventually, I don't quite know how the dolls have the strength to do it, but she gets thrown out of a window. And then somehow, off camera, they bring her corpse from outside back upstairs, put it under the sheets, and bloody sheets are there. Of course, Dad doesn't notice it because dads are idiots in 1987. He gets in bed and starts like trying to cuddle with her or whatever, pulls back the sheet and sees her hideously deformed body and starts screaming. And then we find out as people are starting to look around, doll attacks are in full effect. Everybody's freaking out. Everybody now knows that the little girl's telling the truth because they find the punk rock chicks. Both of them at this point have been killed, and they're turned into like adult-sized dolls. Probably the most iconic imagery in this movie. It's what was on the movie poster. But yeah, they have these doll faces. One of them's holding her eyes in her hands, like they're in her head, and she pulls them out and she's holding them like that. And that's great. That was the most Stuart Gordon thing in this whole movie, because honestly, I'm watching this movie and it just doesn't feel like Stuart Gordon. Of course, to me, Stuart Gordon is Reanimator. Nothing before Reanimator, well, there is nothing before Reanimator, but nothing after Reanimator really affects my opinion of the guy. It's all about Reanimator. But after this retrospective, I might figure out that Reanimator was the one that sticks out here. We'll just have to wait and see. Oh, there's also another part where the punk rock chicks are fighting before they get turned into dolls, and they crack some of the dolls' heads open and they're battling them like that. And we see that these little dolls have like human skulls underneath their porcelain faces, and the teeth are human teeth. It's a great scene. It's a creepy scene. It asks a lot of questions, answers none necessarily, and I like that kind of thing in a horror movie, and it's a pretty horrific image. Finally, there's a big confrontation between Judy and proto Sean Astin and her dad, and like a fight comes out from it, and dolls are getting thrown off shelves and everything. And her dad manages to knock both Ralph and Judy unconscious with like one crashing shelf or something like that. And then with both of them out of the picture, Punch, the little Mr. Punch doll, starts attacking Dad pretty ferociously, and Dad manages to set him on fire, throw him on the ground, and Punch is completely destroyed. So first they got rid of Teddy, now they got rid of Mr. Punch, and Judy's just having a real bad night. And then for a second time, the old lady shows up and she's got this crazy hair. I love the way her hair looks here. I mean, they're saying she just got out of bed, but it is crazy hair that works perfectly. And the dad says, "Are you a witch?" Which they've already asked once before in the movie. And then she starts laughing gleefully and says, "He figured it out. He figured it out." So we find out about the magic behind it. And then we find out exactly where these dolls are coming from, because Dad gets turned into a doll. And not just any doll, he gets turned into Mr. Punch, and he's got the same shirt on as Mr. Punch, which is different than the original shirt Mr. Punch had. And that answers all the questions. This is where all the dolls come from. We find out that the man invites people into his house to tell who still has childlike enthusiasm and who is bitter and adult. And they turn the bitter people into dolls, and the ones with youthful enthusiasm get to live. And I'm glad that I would survive that house. Finally, Ralph and Judy wake up and they go to Boston, because Boston's where Judy's mom lives. And going down the car at the end of the movie, and she got a new teddy bear, by the way. I think the guy gave her just a regular old teddy bear, not a human transformed into a bear. And in the car, she's talking about, hey, maybe if you stay in Boston, my mom's pretty, you could marry her and then you'd be my dad. You know, that's kind of the closing scene. And I read that there were some plans for a Dolls 2, and Dolls 2 was going to follow Ralph and Judy's mom in Boston. But then Empire Pictures started falling apart. All their financial issues were piling up and they had to nix that. And then once Charles Band formed Full Moon Features, he no longer had the rights to dolls. And that's where our beautiful movie Puppet Master comes around, and it's got a couple good sequels and a whole lot of schlock. But the end shot shows all of those victims as dolls, let us know that the punk rock girls are now small dolls, the evil stepmother's a doll, the dad's a doll. It's one creepy ass shot. But it ends on a real high note. What are the high points here? Well, I love Proto Sean Astin. That character really carries the movie. Judy's great, but I mean, she's a kid. Her acting range is limited. You couldn't expect more than that, especially in the 80s when there weren't a ton of Disney shows and Nickelodeon shows and places for kids to work other than commercials, really. Or maybe a sitcom. Well, this girl didn't work in any sitcoms. I don't know about commercials. The monster teddy bear. I love that. I've already gushed over it, so I won't gush over it again. But I love that monster teddy bear scene. It happens early in the movie, gets you hooked. It's very effective, and it just looks good. And then, as I said before, the production design. I love all of those dolls. This creepy house looks very authentic and genuine as a creepy house. If you remember when I was talking about Reanimator, one of my complaints is that nothing looked authentic. Well, this looks extremely authentic, and I like that. But of course, the warts. This movie kind of lacks the humor that we saw in Reanimator. In fact, I'd say there's pretty much no humor in this at all. It's played very straight, and it also lacks the absurdity that we saw. Everything is really played to be scary and not to be over the top. And I think this is my second wart. It's because there was a child lead. And I'm not saying that the child lead is the wart, but just because the lead is a child, they can't really put in things like a severed head assaulting a nude woman. You know, that's just not going to happen in a movie with a little girl as a lead. So that kind of draws back. And of course, I loved all of Frank Henenlotter's stuff that had that bizarre sexual weirdness in it. Not going to get any of that in this movie. And then the punk rock girls. Well, I've never really known any punk rock girls in real life, especially not any 80s punk rock girls, but they fell a little flat. They seemed very caricature. They didn't seem at all convincing. I mean, all the characters are pretty one-dimensional in this movie, but they stuck out as the most. They overplayed every little part, and it got old. I was glad when they got offed by the little puppets. Oh, not puppets, dolls. But the final word, it's not bad, but I really expected more from Stuart Gordon. But of course, I've got more Stuart Gordon to watch, and I'm going to give this 3 out of 5 Ed Woods.